Charlie Kirk's assassination is the exact reason why I left America. America has a lot of issues right now, and it's sad to say, but it feels like it's a failing society in a lot of ways. So one of the things that changed my mind about when I left the country was my stance on guns. Conservatives in America preach about the general population having guns to rise up against tyranny in case we ever need it. I understood that argument to a certain extent, but after living in countries where guns are illegal, I much prefer that guns are illegal, because the general peace of mind and safety that you feel walking around everywhere when you know guns are illegal, that level of peace is something that you can never truly feel in America. One of my friends from childhood, she was just walking around in San Francisco and all of a sudden shots were fired, and it was one of the most traumatic moments of her life because everybody was scrambling everywhere trying to run away from the gun scene. And this is kind of a reality in a lot of places in America where we're always fearful in the back of our head that something is going to go down. Many people argue that guns are not the cause of it and that we have just a major mental health crisis, but I think it's the combination of both. When you have a general population that is quite mentally ill and you have guns that are incredibly easy to get, this is why we have so many school shootings and just acts of violence. Not to mention the fact that social media and just the overall mainstream media in general loves this kind of stuff so they can heighten the tensions in between the two groups. People are blaming his supporters. He deserved it. There's a lot of people that are happy for his death. And this is kind of the sad state of America right now because we can't even have free speech anymore. I remember growing up as a conservative in LA, and maybe this is a very unique experience, but I often just did not want to talk about politics or say where I stood on the fence because I risked so much ostracization from my peers. And even now, recently I made a video, which I took down, about why in this last election I voted for Trump. I'm not saying that I agree with all of his policies, and I'm not even saying that I agree with how he's handling everything right now. I don't think he's particularly doing the best job. But just making that comment, the visceral reaction that I got from the audience was so crazy. People unsubscribed from me. They called me all these different names just because I had a different viewpoint and opinion from them. And in America, even though we promote free speech and everybody should be able to speak their point without fear of consequences or being killed, it seems like we are kind of past that point now. And I think one of the reasons why this death was so shocking is that I genuinely feel like this is going to lead to some form of civil war. It just feels like we've been at a tipping point every single year since COVID, and things just keep on getting ramped up and a lot more intense. And I feel like this feeling of intensity is felt by me as an American, and I'm not even inside America. I think what we're seeing right now is just a decline of a great nation and society, and it seems like our government and mainstream media are the main ones perpetuating this. So one of the negative things about capitalism over everything is that it feels like our mainstream media has also been corrupted with that mentality. No longer are they interested in giving you the news in a non-biased way like it used to be, maybe back in the 60s or 70s. Everything's opinionated now. And this is something that I observed from when Trump was running for office the first time. I thought the news was pretty unbiased until Trump was running, and then it felt like all of the mainstream media outlets were totally against him. Now, I'm not trying to defend him or anything. The coverage of Trump when he was president versus when Biden was president was so drastic. Like, it was only negative things about Trump and only positive things about Biden. Now, if these were on biased news network like Fox or MSNBC, I totally understand it. But this coverage was shown on the mainstream media as well. And I think that's why a lot of people is very distrustful of the mainstream media. Because, for example, they tried to assassinate Trump twice, and that was barely on the news stories. People talked about that for maybe a day, and then it was totally swept under the rug. It's hard to see that the mainstream media is not biased in one direction. If you guys see my channel, you know that I'm pretty objective, and I try to give the positives and the negatives about everything. I don't really align with one side or another, even though I lean a little bit more conservative. I try to give arguments their fair due and try to observe things for myself. We have no trust in the mainstream media anymore because it seems like they're more focused on trying to heighten tensions and divide us. Republicans versus Democrats, rich versus poor, blacks versus whites. It's all about division, 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 and them trying to get attention and clicks rather than telling us the news in a non-biased way and allowing us to think for ourselves. And social media only heightens that. Feels like everything is just so polarized. America encourages this because the more polarizing that you are, the more views that you get, and the more money that you get. And going back to one of the downsides of pure capitalism is that people often will sacrifice their morals for money. America's society rewards the worst values. For example, there's so many famous women right now who are OnlyFans models, and in many places around the world, that is not an honorable thing to do. We kind of promote this idea of being a slut, and it's empowering in America. And these are the women that are getting famous and making a lot of money. So if you're a woman who doesn't want to be a whore, you want to be a classy woman, that doesn't really get rewarded in America. All these OnlyFans girls are making tons of money, and they're almost applauded for it. And all these rappers that we make famous, how they talk about violence, drugs. It seems like women and men are also being taught to hate each other, and the media and a lot of social media content on YouTube also kind of promotes this. Something that I like to tell people is that America is a third world country with a Gucci bag. It has the same level of wealth inequality like some of the other third world countries that I've been to in my life, like Colombia or Ukraine. In America, we are seen as rich, but we have the highest number of OnlyFans models compared to any other country in the world. A part of it is because we have a culture that encourages this type of behavior, but I also think it's because most people are just struggling, and America's culture is to put money over everything. Money over the well-being of your neighbor, well-being over the safety of its citizens. And you can see this with how broken our healthcare system is, how broken our university system is. One thing I notice when I go back to America is that I always feel this sense of uneasiness and dread when I'm walking around. And this is not just in LA. When I go to Miami or just fly into America from any place, I always have this feeling in the back of my head. And I think it's because there is this overwhelming anxiety in the general population of being able to put food on the table. Yes, in America, it's possible to go from poverty to rich, but it does seem like America is a society that favors the top 20% and the rest of the society is just fighting for scraps. We have capitalism to the extreme, and maybe you have a little bit more income to be able to go on vacations, and the American passport is coveted all around the world, so it comes with a certain level of status. But when you go back to America, I feel like the majority of the people are struggling to survive and put food on the table. The cost of living for what you are getting is absolutely ridiculous. And it seems like our culture and society is shifting so quickly, we haven't really been able to find any stability. And ever since COVID, inflation has been so crazy. Every time I go back to the US and I see how expensive everything is, I'm like, why am I paying Switzerland prices, but I can't even get some simple things like basic safety on the street? Another issue about America that nobody wants to talk about is that multiculturalism sounds great on paper and we like to pat ourselves on the back, but in the long term, it really doesn't work. In other countries around the world, such as here in Poland, women feel extremely safe to be able to walk on the street because Polish men will never hurt a Polish girl. You don't have that in America because we have so many different people of different cultures and races and beliefs that it's almost impossible for us to live together in harmony. A lot of people say that, oh, all you gotta do is accept other people's beliefs. But for example, if on a street you have some Iranians and Latinos, Asian people and black people and white people all living next to each other, which is kind of how I grew up actually. We all have different cultural norms. For example, how do you throw a party? You know, us Asians, we try not to bother our neighbors. We don't blast music super loud. Usually things end at a reasonable hour. Whereas Latinos and black people, when they have parties, everybody in the neighborhood is invited, they're outside, they're playing music extremely loudly. I'm not saying one is good over the other, but this is just some fundamental cultural differences based on different cultures and different races. Now, every country has political divides, right? People that are on the left and people on the right. But in America, we have the added thing of not only do we have political differences, we also have cultural differences. And there's a culture that seems to want to cover up the fact that we're all different. And we can't even have these conversations because it's seen as racist. I do think that the world is healing right now because a lot of people are kind of sick of the woke narrative of multiple genders and the fact that we are all the same when we are clearly not. There are no Asian guys in the NBA. No matter how hard we try, our genetics are just not made to be athletic like black guys or some of these white guys, right? As an Asian person, I'm willing to admit that. The physical realm is not our strength. That's why we're so good at academics, I believe, because we had to find a way to contribute to society. But living in a homogeneous society like Poland, there is a general understanding of certain cultural norms that everybody has to follow. And even though, yes, Polish people might all hate each other, at least they're not going to be killing each other on the street just because they have a different opinion. I also think that as you get older, you know, I'm 30 now, I value safety more than anything. I lived in Colombia for a few years and had a bunch of crazy stuff happen to me. I got jumped on the street. I had a crazy divorce with my ex-wife. I had a fallout with this extremely religious church that eventually sent me death threats. I got scammed by a bunch of people. But I'm gonna be honest, all of those things could also be experienced in the US. I know people that have gotten jumped, that have gotten robbed, have been victims of gun violence, have seen it personally. They tried to kill Trump twice, and now Charlie Kirk is dead because of an assassination, right? This is stuff that you hear in like third world, like in Mexico or in Colombia. But this is happening every day in the US. It's really sad to see because I think America on paper is truly an amazing concept and idea. And I think it's the purest form of democracy and power to the people that I've seen in almost any country that I've been to. But as I get older, I'm starting to understand that giving the people 100% freedom is not always the right answer. And that's not what people always want. Because you need a level of baseline understanding and control and stability that people can latch onto, that everybody agrees upon, and then you build freedom on top of that. Whereas America's philosophy is just freedom and wild, wild west for everything. And I think on paper that's a great idea of freedom, but then it leads to people putting money over everything. That's why our healthcare system is so broken, pharmaceutical system, university system. Cost of living is extremely high. It doesn't seem like it favors the people, it favors big corporations, because in America, this is what we preach, capitalism over everything. And this is what you get in the true wild, wild west. So it's really unfortunate to see what's going on in America right now. I feel very, very torn about it as an American. I am very proud to be American. I love the things that we stand for. But as of right now, I only see America declining and going on the downhill. And I don't think that can be debated. And after living in a bunch of countries all around the world, I'm in Europe right now, and I really, really love living in Poland. I think it's an amazing quality of life. It's very safe, it's very clean. There's a great sense of national pride and unity. That idea of going back to America just does not sound appealing at all. And it's not a place that I would particularly want to raise my family. America is a really, really big place, so it's very hard to generalize. You know, this is just one isolated incident in Utah. But I would argue that the feeling of this anxiety and nervousness, we don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future. Things feel a lot more divided than ever. I would argue that that is felt all over the country, and even for Americans who are not living in America anymore. Charlie Kirk being killed was the most shocking thing that I've seen in a while. You know, there's a lot of crazy things coming out of America, but that one really, really, like, my jaw dropped to the floor because I didn't think it would go that intense. But here we are. I'm really curious to see what the response is going to be. That, and for many reasons, is why I don't think I'm going back to America anytime soon.